This video is my first in the series on the Vienna, so we are starting off with e4, e5, and of course it is the move knight c3 that marks the beginning of the Vienna game. And in this video in particular, we will look at the most popular response by black, which is knight to f6. If you look at the Grandmaster database, it's about 3 in every 4 games knight to f6 is played. And if you look at the Lichess database, for example, it's about almost 50% of games that you get something similar like this. And against this variation in particular, I like to go for the Vienna Gambit, which is an immediate pawn to f4. And pawn to f4 is very often a plan in the Vienna, but sometimes it's a bit too late. You first play something like d3, so your bishop is protecting this. But now we are just going to play it immediately, because against this knight f6 move, we can do this. You can't play this against everything. For example, if black plays knight to c6 and you go for f4, well, you can always try, but this is already a little bit dubious, let's say. I wouldn't recommend to play it in this specific order. So we're going to look at knight f6, pawn to f4. And in this video, I will take a look at the Vienna Gambit accepted. Only this variation, because there are a lot of really interesting lines that we are going to cover. So what is the plan here for white if black takes your pawn? Of course, black doesn't have to take, but I will cover that in the next video. So here as white, we are going to push. Simply pushing the pawn. Why? Well, if you look at this knight, it doesn't have any squares. So it basically has to go back to g8. And okay, black was able to take a pawn for free, but their knight has to go back. We will be able to grab the center and also recapture this pawn. So pretty much black has to play this, and even though this move is pretty forced, you don't always see it. Sometimes players make the mistake of moving their knight somewhere to one of those squares where it is attacked, or a common move as well is playing queen to e7, which we are going to cover, but this is a really bad way for black to try and defend. The idea is black is trying to be tricky, pin the pawn to the king, so now we can no longer capture the knight, but this doesn't really work if you know how to play against this from the white side. So this is one of those lines where it's important to know what to do. Here we are going to play queen to e2, and it's easy to remember this, first of all because queen to e2 is a very common move in the Vienna in general, but also by putting the queen here and basically copying black's position, now this pawn is free and able to take the knight. So again, we are just simply asking black, what are you going to do? You have to move your knight and you can't really go anywhere except going back. And that's why this queen e7 is not a good move. It doesn't solve the position. It just delays the inevitable with one move. But now this queen is basically blocking the only good square for the knight and the bishop. So the queen is just blocking, the black pieces from developing. And we can just continue, of course, pawn to d4, grabbing the center, which is very normal in the Vienna, and then we can also recapture this with the bishop. Black to move, but if you look at this, it's already a big struggle. What's going to happen here for black? Yeah, probably knight to c6 is one of those developing moves, maybe d6, but d6 is also really bad. One thing you might be a little bit worried about is like what happens if they go for this check. Well, actually, if they go for this check, we are just going to move the king. And that might sound crazy, but the thing is, this doesn't really help black. And in the future, we're going to play the knight here, attack this, recapture this, and we still have a winning position with many tactics. So you shouldn't really worry. For example, after they play knight to c6, you just have knight to c3. Basically, the queen's got to move again. You can recapture this. And even though our king has moved, white is winning this in every line. So don't worry about this, just move your king. Of course, you don't want to play this pawn here, otherwise all of a sudden you would be getting a position like this and dropping your rook. So we don't want to play that. So most of the time black will try something like knight c6, maybe d6, but it's always losing, basically because of a beautiful trick, which is to go knight to d5, and it's black to move. Doesn't really matter what black does, we are attacking the queen and also this pawn on c7. So I'm going to say this move, it might also be something else, might also be queen here, it doesn't really matter. And you might be thinking that black was able to stop us from forking them. But that's not true, we still have the fork. We can play knight takes c7, bam. King under attack, rook under attack, basically the queen has to capture us, and now we play pawn takes and of course a discovered check with the queen. The king has to go somewhere, and then we can grab the queen for free. So that's the beautiful thing about this position. If they go for this queen e7, usually black will be in a lot of trouble because of all these knight to d5 lines. Even if they play something else, for example, let's say knight to c6, we continue with development. Okay, I know we can take this, but we don't have to rush this. We can just play knight to f3. And if at some point they play this pawn to d6, that's when you can go with the knight here attacking, and then in the future also doing this trick. So all of this to say that queen e7, it's a bad move for black. Black should go with the knight to g8. And now we can continue here. There are a couple of ways to continue, but I like playing knight f3 first. Then in the future we can play d4. You might also say I'm going to play d4 immediately, but still this sometimes allows for this check, which we already covered. This check is never a big problem, but here there's no reason to allow black to do this check. So it's best to first protect this, and then in the future we can push the pawn to d4. Black, of course, is still struggling. I mean, this knight can't really develop. There are a lot of moves for black, but they are all losing. And we are going to take a look in total at 6 different variations from this position onwards. And the first one is pawn to d6, which is the most played. About 40% of games you will get this. So they play the pawn, of course, to also attack our center. Doesn't matter. We are just going to protect it. And most of the time they end up taking your pawn. There are other moves as well. By the way, if you want to learn more about this opening, you can find the top pinned comment, and then you will find a link to this glitches study, and there will be variations that I won't cover in the video that you can check out there as well if you want to have the full repertoire for the Vienna. There are other things, for example, like the bishop here, which is it's immediately losing for black as well. You just take here, for example, this. We recapture with the bishop. Of course, we don't want this, and we also don't want to lose the queen. So we recapture this. This is very devastating for black. If you want to see the details, you can always check out the Lichess study. Sometimes they also try to play knight to c6. It doesn't really matter. We can take. Here, of course, we take with the knight because we don't want our bishop to be traded. We can get something like this, and this is also very good for white. The most common move is for black to just capture on e5. This is where we can play a beautiful trick. And the trick I will show you is almost never played by white. This is a Vienna trick that has almost never been seen. Almost never played, which means you will surprise your opponents. They won't know what's coming. And that is bishop to b5 check. And this is a perfect move in this position. And you might be thinking this move is insane. Of course, because black just has the very simple move pawn to c6. But we are setting up a beautiful trap that basically it doesn't have any downside. The reason why we play this is actually we want to put the queen on e2, because then we can go for tricks. But if you play the queen to e2 immediately, which is the most played move, so this is probably what's recommended by most Vienna course creators, to play the queen to e2, but you are blocking your own bishop. So I recommend go for the check. Of course, c6 is the most likely move because I think they are winning a tempo. They can also play the knight here or here, doesn't really matter. Afterwards, we are still going to play the queen here. If they push the pawn, we are just going to move the bishop back. And basically, we achieved our goal. We were able to develop the bishop before moving the queen. And this pawn is a bit of a problem for black because it's also blocking the knight from developing. And at the same time, black might fall for a trap. Here black is thinking, well, I captured the pawn, they give me this check, I can win a tempo. Well, I'm just up 2 pawns already, like white is done, 2 pawns, and black can still continue grabbing pawns. So most players will go for this pawn takes here. Of course, they can play different things, which isn't really a problem. We have tricks against anything, but most players will play pawn takes d4. And when they play this, we are going to play something completely insane. So right now, we are already behind 3 pawns, but we are going to play bishop takes f4. And this is just insanity because, of course, the knight is hanging. But this is a beautiful trick. If black takes the knight, which is a big blunder, they are immediately losing. Because of bishop takes f7, brilliant move, attacking the king, and it's already game over. Of course, they can't capture us, otherwise they would be losing the queen. So the king has to go. and then we can play queen to e2, check, which sacrifices another bishop. So we are already losing by about 7 points of material, but we are actually winning the game. For example, here, knight check, king has to move, and then bishop check. We are also sacrificing the bishop, so we are now already behind 10 points of material, but we have a win. Knight check, king has to move. We take the rook, we don't take the queen, we take the rook. Another check, and then we can castle, another check, we can move out the knight, another check, and we can win the queen. And this position is just a checkmate. The king is here in the center. We already have the queen, the knight, the rook. This is going to be a checkmate in every single line. So it's crazy. We sacrifice 10 points of material. And of course, many other moves are also possible. The king might also try and step in front of your queen. Then you always have this, which is a check, and you can also win the queen. A little bit earlier, the king might also make different moves, but in many of those lines, for example, this is just a checkmate. So basically, from the moment we play bishop to f7, it's already game over, which means that black can't capture this knight. But I think many players won't immediately see this. Okay, they will probably see that there are some tricks, but you have to really calculate far into the future and realize that why is going to sacrifice 10 points of material to get a checkmate. So uh, almost everybody will take this. If they don't take this, we are also winning. For example, let's say they play something like knight to f6. We can go knight to g5. We have a trick here as well. If they play bishop e7, of course, we are just doing this simple fork. So we are going to win back some material. Yeah, there's not much to say. Maybe they can try and play bishop to e6, which we can take with the knight, attack the queen, and of course here we are not saving the knight, we are sacrificing another knight, because if they take this, you can simply win the queen. And if they don't take this, well, let's say they take this knight, like everything is hanging right now, it's just crazy. Let's say they take this knight, we are also just playing this, because we want to go for the discovered attacks. We are sacrificing the pawn in the corner, and then we have something like knight check. This is pinned, this can't be captured, the king has to go, check, and then we just save the rook. We still can win this rook in the corner. It's total madness. If you want to see all variations for this line, as I said, check out the pinned comment, and then you can find the Lichess study, where there are, I think, even 10 more different checkmating lines. So again, we are going to take a look at the Vienna Gambit. Black accepts it. We get this line. And now black plays knight to c6. So we just covered pawn to d6, which loses for black. Now we are going to check what if they play knight to c6, which is the second most popular move. Well, we are again just going to continue like normal. We are going to set up the center. And most of the time, black in these positions still plays pawn to d6 because they want to fight back for the center. That's one of the most common moves. You might also see bishop b4, which is also immediately losing because of pawn to d5 attacking the knight. The knight's got to go, or they can maybe take here first, but still the knight's got to go. And if you look at this, basically the knight can't go anywhere. The knight has to go to e7. And I can already hear you thinking by this point, like, wait, there are just too many lines. And I have to agree with you, there are actually too many lines. If you really want to know all of them by heart and study them, there are too many lines. But you don't have to study all of them. You just have to understand that you have to go for the attack. Always go for the attack. Don't worry if you are sacrificing a couple of pawns. As you have seen, you can even sacrifice full pieces. It doesn't matter. We just want to go for the attack as much as we can. And also try to prevent black from developing. So the king is stuck in the center for as long as possible. And that is how we are going to win. So here, pawn to d6. Of course, attacking the knight. Again, we are never going to let this knight rest. Most of the time, black will take. The knight's got to go. You might be thinking, well, black is just saving the knight, but this pawn is really annoying, and it's pretty hard for black to continue with development. We can do multiple things. Bishop b5, knight f6, queen check. By the way, nothing can block this, so the king has to move. It's terrible. We are going to recapture here, and black is just losing in every single line. As I said, more details you can find in the Lichess study as well. So that's why most of the time I think bishop is terrible. Probably d6 is going to be played anyways. We can capture here. Black might capture here. And now the question is, how are we going to recapture this? You might be thinking, well, can't we just go for the check and then the queen and all of those tricks? Well, The problem is this knight is already here as a protector, so this is a bit better for black, so we will have to figure out something else. For example, knight takes e5. Of course, we don't want this. We also never want to give away the bishop, so we are taking with the knight. They might capture us, and now is the moment you have been waiting for, the next trick in this position. So you might think we are just going to recapture with the bishop, but that's not true. We are going to play queen to e2. So again, we just sacrificed the full piece, but we are going to play queen to e2. This pins the knight, and of course the knight is also under attack. But we are setting up a huge trap, and almost every move that black can play here, except for one move, is a blunder. And even the move that's not a blunder loses the game. The first thing that I think most players will try is just taking here with the queen. Because actually by moving the queen again, we are dropping a pawn. And yeah, it seems logical that black might be wanting to take this. But it's immediately losing again. Bishop takes e5, the queen is under attack. The queen has to go, but yeah, the queen can go to a couple of squares, maybe d8, probably here for the check, doesn't really matter, but we can actually drop back, also give a check, so black has to go back with the queen, and now we have knight to d5. You can already see this coming, it's the same trick as we had earlier. Even if they exchange the queens, we still have this. If they try to play bishop, they actually got this check. You might be thinking, well, what if they move the rook? They still got this check. The king is in the center of the board. We can always castle queenside as well, activate the rook. This is protected. We might have discovery threats. If they play queen d4, the game is already over. They might also play f6. I don't know why, but this is a very commonly played move here. I mean, we just take the knight, they take back, and then bam, we play queen to h5, check. You might think, well, I can just take this with the queen. Sure, that's winning, but you can also go for the check, because they actually have to block, check again, and then you can see we might be winning the rook. So they pin us, and we can play knight to d5 again. Going for this trick, pressure on the queen. If they exchange, we just take with the bishop. We are winning this rook. We might be winning this rook as well. It's +8 already for white. And then the next move is, so f6 we covered, yeah, queen d4 we covered. Sometimes bishop d6 is also played. Well, you can just take this, and the bishop is under attack. The bishop has to move. Most often move is here, and then yeah, you can just win the bishop. If they go somewhere else, for example here, we can attack the queen, and we are winning material on every single line. This is also a +4 line. So just to show you how tricky this can be, all of these lines with the queen lined up, black players really don't know what to do against this. Most commonly played is, not most commonly played, what am I saying? I mean best by engine recommendation is bishop to g4. And this is one of those high level moves. We counter attack the queen, okay, our knight is gonna fall. Well, this is one of those lines, we are just gonna take the knight, with check. They might go in with the queen, we take with check, we take this pawn, and I mean, white is better here, white is up a pawn, white also has a bit of a better position, but most likely we will get something like this, check, and then maybe castle on the queen side. And of course this is better, white is winning, but it's not as an extreme position as we have seen before. Then we still have 4 amazing lines to cover, so let's make a little bit of tempo here. So e4, e5, knight to c3, knight f6, Vienna Gambit, we are attacking the knight, playing knight to f3, of course, remember we want to stop the check, bishop b4, that's what we're going to look at right now. So if you want to play regular moves against this, maybe even knight d5, I mean you can do this, it's perfectly fine, but I did find a beautiful variation that I wanted to show you as well, which is pawn to a3. We attack the bishop. And most often played is bishop takes, which is immediately losing. They trade the bishop and they lose on the spot. It's almost unbelievable. The engine is screaming you have to go back with the bishop, but why did you develop it in the first place? Where is the knight ever going to move? Nowhere. So yeah, bishop takes c3 is losing. Because of pawn takes c3, but it's the d pawn that captures. And you will realize in a moment why. So black is going to continue, for example, they will develop the knight to e7 because they want to quickly castle and be safe. Bam, we recaptured the pawn. Black castles. Everything looks fine for black. Well, actually not really if you look at this. It's pretty pathetic play by black, but okay. And we can play queen to d2, knight c6, and long castles. And that's just beautiful. This position is already +3. because the king looks safe, but it's an illusion. The king is very unsafe. For example, b6, h4. We are just gonna push the h pawn all the way here if we can. So we are gonna push, and of course black has to stop us. They can also ignore it. We can continue pushing, and we will keep pushing until something has to move. And now we can even move the g pawn. We are gonna break open everything. Sometimes play the bishop here, sacrifice everything we have, and go for a checkmate. So black has to prevent us from pushing, but I want to push the pawn. So I play pawn to g4. And I'm gonna either take here and create big problems, or they take me. And again, our knight is under attack, but we don't care about the knights. Pawn to h5. We sacrifice the knight. What are we gonna play? Pawn to h6. It doesn't matter. I told you, we're gonna walk all the way here to h8. You might be thinking it's insane. I know, I also think it's insane, but black is losing because the king is overexposed. The rook is active here. The queen's gonna swoop in as well for checkmates. This is terrible. Of course, taking this, it's asking for problems. For example, queen h2, this is checkmate in 8. Thank you, Stockfish, for the information. They might also play pawn to g6, which I think is a very common move. h7, we want to go to the promotion square. And if we are very lucky, black might play this. And don't think we can promote, because actually the rook is protecting this. But if this happens, we are winning because of bishop here, and this is a checkmate. This is already a beautiful checkmate, and there is nothing black can do, well, except for the engine recommendation of sacking your queen. But if you just play a regular move, this is a checkmate. It's a bit sad the pawn didn't reach the square, but okay. The king might also hide in the corner. We also play bishop here. We want to go for this. The only safe move for black that, well, okay, it loses the game, but it extends it a little bit, is to go for this, sack the rook, and then, yeah, now black is behind and material as well, and we can go for this checkmate, maybe push this. It's +5, white is gonna win this. So that's another beautiful variation, and I got 3 more interesting variations as well. Okay, so again, quickly, we have seen this, the Vienna Gambit. What if black plays bishop to c5? This is the 4th most played move, about 9,000 games on leeches. Well, pretty easy, of course. We just build up the center, attack the bishop. Bishop's gotta go. Again, not really sure. You can go b6, b4, it doesn't matter. I think this will be played a little bit more by most players. And we can just capture this. Look at the center, it's already very beautiful. Black wants to develop the knight so they can castle. And we are just gonna go immediately for tactics again. Knight to g5. You might be saying, well, black can just castle, yes, but we're gonna continue the aggressive attack. Bishop to c4. And it's already a lot of trouble. Let's say I just randomly develop one of those pieces. Queen to h5. And everything is coming in. We are going for the checkmate. If they play this, of course, it's checkmate. What if they play this? Bam, we sack the knight. If they take with the rook, it's already a lot of problems. We take this. The king has to go somewhere. Bam, we sacrifice the bishop. If they take, that's checkmate. If they don't take, I don't even know what move to make for them. For example, this, we actually also have a checkmate because the king is stuck and they can't go here. So we're just going to sacrifice everything. So knight g5. If black wants to be a bit safe, they have to play h6. This attacks the knight. But it's just an illusion. We can just play knight to f7. Going for the fork. Okay, we are sacking the knight, but we are going for tactics. Bishop to c4. King's gotta go. You might be tempted to play queen here immediately, but then suddenly you will realize we don't have anything. And that is why we actually want to be a little bit safe. We are going to castle first. Black might take this, I don't care. And then we can continue with our plan. We are just going to keep pushing because the king is actually still stuck in the center. We are just going to push, and at some point we are going to put the bishop on d3 because now this queen move is looking juicy. And for example here, we can play the queen out. If they play g6, of course, we sacrifice another piece. We go for the check, and then this is beautiful. Sack another piece, and then we have checkmate. Again, we are behind 4 points, I think, in material, but it's still a beautiful checkmate. So that is how you can destroy the bishop to c5. Next up, another line which is sometimes feared by Vienna players, and that is you play the Vienna Gambit, but black plays pawn to g5. And most of the time when they do this, they know what they are doing. They have prepared that they want to hold on to this pawn for as long as possible. So we will have to fight back. d4 is of course our next move, strengthening the center as usual. There are a lot of moves for black which can be played, but most of them are pretty bad. h6 is sometimes played. By the way, you can play h4 then, because we want to bait black into playing pawn to g4. And when they do, oh no, the knight is under attack. You know what that means? Time to sacrifice another knight. We're just going to sack the knight, take with the queen. There's not even that much compensation here, but it doesn't matter because the queen is still active. One beautiful line is if they push g4 really early on, so they didn't play h6, they pushed g4 early on, which is the most played move, so maybe black doesn't know what they are doing. We just play the brilliant move again, bishop f4. They can take, we take, and I'm just going to move a little bit more quickly just to show you one variation, because these are just insane. We are going to sack another pawn, sack another bishop, go in with the queen, long castle, like we are sacking everything. We are not even immediately going for a checkmate, just activating pieces, but the king is still stuck in the center. And in the end, for example, this will be a checkmate. There are more variations in the Lichess study as well, if you want to know them. Black also might play a bit more safe, for example, pawn to d6, but we're always going to try and bait them into playing pawn to g4. And the moment they do, we have tricks. You can still sack the knight here, but in this particular position, it's best to just move the knight and sack the knight here. And then you get this position, and yeah, it's amazing. You can find even more tricks in the Lichess study. And we have finally arrived at our final destination, the last position here for the Vienna Gambit. Again, we have seen this a million times already. What if black plays d5? And I have to say, if you watch this video and you are now terrified of facing the Vienna Gambit, I think d5 is one of the better options for black. So pawn to d5. We are going to play again pawn to d4, strengthening the center. And then it's most played bishop g4 by black. It's actually not the best move. The best move is bishop here, which leads to a bit of a boring game. Maybe something like this, knight to c6. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad, of course, yeah, this would be winning a pawn. It's even hard to find moves. Let's say knight to e7. It's never bad for white, of course. White is always winning. But yeah, this is the best approach for black. But most players go wrong and they play bishop g4. We take this. For example, they develop the knight. We can pin it. They try to chase away our bishop. Whenever that happens, usually it's best to just trade here and create some problems. We can castle. They can pin our knight. We can kick away their bishop. We might get a trade. We might get another trade. Knight to e7. Rook here and castles. And if you look at this, okay, I know I went a little bit quickly, but the point is, if they play the pawn to d5, you won't get those really amazing checkmates that we have seen all the time. But this position is still winning for white. It's +2, and it's +2 because it's strategically winning. You can already see we have the center. We have the rook on the open file. We have a bishop versus a knight. Usually the bishop is a bit better. We have our queen, rook lined up here. So yeah, it's going to be a grind. It's going to be a long game, but white will win this. So if you enjoyed this, definitely subscribe. More videos on the Vienna are coming soon.